In this video, I will show you how to reload weapons in Unreal Engine 5. This video is part of my weapon system tutorial series, so if you're not up to date, I'll leave a link to the first video on the screen now and also in the video description. Now let's get straight into this tutorial. For this system, I'm going to be using animations downloaded from Mixamo, which I have left a link to in the video description. Once here, we're going to go to Animations, then search for a reload animation. Select this one, then click Download. Then go to this drop down and make sure it's set to Without Skin. Then click Download again. Next we need to download a weapon mesh. We need one that has a magazine separate to the rest of the weapon. So if you'd like to use this one, I have left a link in the video description. Once you have downloaded these, open up your Unreal Engine project. Open the content browser, then go to somewhere you would like to import the weapon mesh. Then go to Import and select the weapon, then click Open. Then you can just click Import All. Close this, then go back to the content browser, where you can now see that all the parts of the weapon mesh have been imported. Now I'm just going to go to File and Save All. Next, go back to the content browser and open up your Animation Sequences folder. Next, click Import again, then select the reloading animation, then just click Open. Next, go to the skeleton drop-down and select our character's skeleton, then just click Import All. If you open this, you can now see that we have an animation to use to reload our weapons. So now we can just click Save and close it. Next you want to right click on it, then go to Create, then select Create Anim Montage. Name this AM_reloading. Then I'm just going to move this to the Animation Montages folder. Now if you open this, you can see that we have a montage of our reloading animation. Next, we want to add an input to trigger the character to reload. So go back to the content browser and locate your Input Actions folder. Next, right-click, then go to Input, then select Input Action. Name this IA_reload. This input's value type should be set to digital bool. Now you can just save and close this. Next, go back to the content browser and locate your input mapping context. Open it, then add a new mapping. Go to the drop-down and select our reloading input action. Press the keyboard button, then select the key on your keyboard that you would like to use for this input. I'm just going to use R. Now you can just save and close this. Next, go to the content browser and locate your character blueprint. Open it, then in some space, right-click and add our reloading input action. Then expand it. Once this input is triggered, we want to play our reloading animation montage. So first drag the character mesh into the graph. Then drag off it and search for Play Montage. Connect it to the started pin, then go to the drop-down and select our reloading animation montage. If we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. If we press our reload input, the player should start reloading. As you can see, if the player starts reloading while walking, the character's leg stops showing the walking animation. To fix this, we only want to show the reloading animation on the top half of the player's body. So first, go back to the reloading animation montage. Here we want to go to this drop down, then go to slot name and change it to upper body. Now we can just save this. Next we want to go to the content browser and locate our animation blueprint. Open it. Here we want to come down and disconnect the upper body slot. Then we're going to move it to after the blend poses by bool. This is because we want the upper body animations to show whether or not the player is holding a weapon. At the moment they're only working for if the player is not holding a weapon. Once this is done, if you compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, you will see that if you reload and walk at the same time, the reload animation shows on the top of the body, while the walking animation shows on the bottom. Currently, our player is able to reload even if they're not holding a weapon. In addition to this, if they spam the reload button, the reload animation keeps cancelling and restarting. We don't want this, so let's fix it by quickly going back to the player character, then making some space before the play montage and dragging in our isHoldingWeapon variable. Drag off it and search for a branch. Connect it to the started pin, then if this returns true, it means the player is holding a weapon and we are going to be able to reload. Next we're going to add another variable which will tell us if the player has already started reloading. Name this isReloading, then make sure the type is set to Boolean. Drag this into the graph. Then drag off it and search for another branch. Connect this to the true pin. We're going to want the montage to play if the player is not already reloading, so in a second we'll connect it to the false pin. But before we do that, we want to drag in the isReloading variable again, then click set and set it to true. Then we'll just connect it up. So now the player can only reload if they're holding a weapon and also not already reloading. And now if the reload starts, the isReloading variable is set to true, which stops them being able to reload. Next we want to allow them to reload once the animation has finished playing. So to do this, after the play montage, drag in the isReloading variable again and set it. Leave it set to false, then connect it to the onCompleted pin. Now if we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, we will not be able to reload before picking up the weapon, and will also not be able to reload if we've started reloading the weapon. Next thing we need to do is replace our gun mesh with the one we just downloaded, as the magazine of the weapon needs to be able to be disconnected from the rest of the weapon. So go to the content browser, then go to the weapons folder. Open up the base weapon blueprint. Open up the viewport. We already have this base gun mesh, but we're going to replace it with our new one. Our new weapon is actually a static mesh, so we're going to click the add button, then search for a static mesh. Name this body. Next, we need to set the static mesh to the main body of the weapon we imported. So to find this easily, go to the content browser, then go to the folder where you imported it to. Find the main body of your gun, then drag it on to the static mesh. Next I'm going to make this a bit bigger to match the size of our current weapon, so I'm going to increase the scale to 1.3. Now we no longer need our original gun mesh, then drag the arrow onto the body, then you can just delete the skeletal mesh. Next we're going to add the magazine, so click the add button and search for another static mesh. Name this mag. Next we're going to do the same again, so go to the content browser, then drag the magazine mesh onto the static mesh. Next we just want to reset the scale to match the scale of the body of the weapon. Next select both meshes, then in the details panel scroll down to the collision section. Here we want to set the collision preset to no collision. This is so the weapon does not accidentally collide with the player character. Now we can just compile and save this. Next we're going to set up one of the children of this base weapon. This is where we're going to add the rest of the parts of the gun, which we'll be able to change depending on what weapon we want it to be. So for this I'm going to go to the content browser, then open up the base semi-auto weapon. Open it, then go to the viewport. Here you can see that the body and magazine are already here, so we're just going to add the rest of the elements of the gun. So select the body, then open the content browser, then hold Ctrl and select these 4 meshes. Then you can just drag them on to the body of the weapon. We need to reset the scale of all of these parts, so select them all, then just click the Reset Scale button. Next we need to make sure that these also have no collision, so scroll down and set the collision preset to no collision. Next, the arrow we're using for the start point of where our bullets are shot from needs to be moved close to the end of the barrel of the gun. So an easy way to line this up is to go to a different perspective, and if it's not already, set it to wireframe. Then you can just zoom in and move it into position. We want to make sure that the arrow is just a little bit in front of the barrel of the weapon, just so that we don't have any issues with it colliding with the weapon. Next we need to change our weapon pickup so that they match our new guns. So compile and save, then go back to the content browser. Open up the weapon pickups folder, then open the base weapon pickup. Here we want to go to the viewport, then we can just select our current mesh and delete it. Then click add and add a static mesh. Name this body. Then go to the content browser and find the weapon body mesh. Then drag it onto the static mesh. Next, in the details panel, scroll down and set the collision preset to custom. Leave this set to collision enabled, then change the object type to physics body. We want the pickup to not be affected by the player character, so set the pawn to ignore. Next, we want our pickups to be affected by gravity, so search for physics, then set physics to enabled. Now we can just compile and save, then go back to the content browser and open up the semi-auto weapon pickup, where we're going to add the rest of the parts of the weapon. So go to the viewport, select the body of the weapon, then go to the content browser and select the same meshes that we did before. Then we can just drag them on top of the body. Then we want to hold Shift and select all of these parts. Then in the details panel, scroll down and set all the collision settings to the same that we did for the body. This is done, so now we can compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. If you go over and pick up a weapon, you can see that we're now using our new gun mesh. However, at the moment, the gun isn't positioned properly in the player's hands. So to fix this, we need to move the socket that the weapon is attached to. So go to the content browser and locate our character's skeleton, and then open it. Then we want to set the preview animation to our idle rifle animation. I'm going to quickly remove this preview SMG asset. So to do this, right click on its socket, then click remove all attached assets. Now for our gun, we're using this rifle socket. So to make things easier, I'm going to add a preview asset. So right click on it, then go to add preview asset, then select the body of our weapon. Because our gun is not one single asset, it makes things a little bit more difficult when moving it into the right position. So move it as best you can to where you think the right place is. Then save it and go back to the viewport and press play, then pick up a weapon to see how it looks. At the moment this looks pretty good, but it still requires some more tweaking. So go back and forth, moving and rotating the socket, and going back to the viewport and pressing play to see how it looks, until you're happy with the position of the weapon. It can also be helpful to use different perspectives, just to make sure that the weapon is positioned perfectly and is pointing directly in front of the player. Now that our gun is positioned properly, we can move on to creating the functionality for taking the magazine out of the gun and replacing it with another one. A reload animation has 4 main events that need to occur. The first is when the player takes the empty magazine out of the gun. The next is when the player drops the empty magazine on the ground. The third is when the player grabs a new magazine, and the fourth is when they put that magazine back into the weapon. So to trigger each of these events, we're going to use montage notifies. These can be placed at different points in an animation montage so that when that point in the animation is reached, logic can be triggered in the player character. So let's go back to the reloading animation montage, then just pause the timeline. We want to move through the animation until we reach our first event, which is when the player grabs the magazine. Once you think you have found that point, you can right-click on the one track, then go to Add Notify, then select Montage Notify. We want to name these clearly for what they are, so I'm going to name this one Unload. Next we're going to move along to the point where the player would drop the magazine. Again we're going to right-click, go to Add Notify, then select Montage Notify. Move it into position, then I'm going to name this one Drop. Move along again until you get to the point where the player grabs a new magazine. Right-click and add another notify, and name this one Grab. Finally, there's one more we need to add, which is when the player puts the magazine back in the weapon. So find this point, then right-click and add one last notify. Call this one Load. Now we can just save this, then go back to the player character. When a notify is reached in this montage, it's passed through the notify name pin, which returns the name of that specific notify. So to choose what logic is used when each notify is triggered, we're going to drag off and add a switch on name. We want to disconnect it from here and connect it to the onBegin notify, so that it's triggered every time a notify is hit. This node effectively receives the notify name, then changes the outcome depending on what it is. So as we have 4 different events that we need to create, I'm going to add 4 new pins. Select the notify, then we need to name each of these outcome pins to have the same name as our notifies. So I'm going to call them unload, drop, grab, and load. It's worth quickly testing that this system is working properly, so I'm going to drag off the first pin and add a print string. I'm then going to copy and paste it 3 more times, and then set the text in each to 1, 2, 3, and 4, and connect it to each pin. Now if I compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, then pick up a weapon and press the reload input, you should see that 1, 2, 3, and 4 are printed in order. You will see that 1, 2, 3, and 4 are printed in order at the points of the events in our reload animation. Next we're going to go on to creating the logic for each event. So go back to the player character. We're going to start with the unload logic where the player grabs the magazine out of the gun. So the first thing we want to do is hide the magazine in the weapon when the player grabs it. So to do this, drag in our current weapon variable, then drag off it and search for the get magazine. This is the magazine mesh in our base weapon. Next, drag off it and search for a set visibility. We want to keep the new visibility set to false, then connect it to the unload pin. Now if we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, then pick up a weapon and go to reload, you will see that when the player goes to grab the magazine, it disappears. Now at this point we also want to spawn a new magazine in the player's hand. So for this we're going to create a magazine actor. So open the content browser and go to our blueprints folder. Right click and add a new folder. Call this magazines. Open it, then right click and add another folder. Call this one held magazines. Open that, then right click again and go to blueprint class, then select actor. Name this BP_base held mag. Open it, then go to the viewport. Click the add button and add a static mesh. Name this mag. Next, set it to our weapons magazine mesh. Then scroll down and set the collision preset to no collision. For these actors, we're going to use the same parent-child system that we use for our weapons, so that we can have different magazines for each gun we have. So go to the content browser and right-click on our magazine, then select Create Child Blueprint Class. Name this BP_semi-auto rifle held mag. If we open it, we don't need to change the mesh as it's already set to the one our rifle is using. Next, we need to store this magazine actor in a variable in our base weapon, so that we know which magazine to spawn based on what weapon we are holding. So open the content browser and go to the weapons folder, then open the base weapon blueprint. Add a new variable and call it held mag. Then set the type to our base held mag. Make sure that this is set to a class reference. Now compile and save, then go to our base semi-auto weapon. Here we want to go to class defaults, then in the details panel, we can set the held mag variable to our semi-auto rifle mag. Now we can compile and save, then go back to the player character, where we'll set up the logic to spawn the magazine in the player's hand. So drag off the current weapon variable and search for the get held mag. Then drag off it and search for a spawn actor from class. Connect this after the set visibility. For the spawn transform, we want this to be at the position of the magazine in the gun. So drag off the mag and search for a get world transform. Then connect it to the spawn transform pin. Next, right click on the return value and promote it to a variable. Name this held mag. This is so that we can store the current magazine and access it later. Next, we want to attach this to the player's hand. So drag off and search for an attach actor to component. For the parent, this is going to be our character mesh, so drag in the mesh and connect it to the parent pin. Next, we're going to need to create a socket on the player's hand that we can attach this magazine to. So to do this, go to our player's skeleton. I'm going to right-click on the rifle socket and remove the preview asset. Then I'm going to change the preview animation to our reloading animation. Next, pause the animation and move along to the point where the player grabs the magazine. The player is grabbing it with their right hand, so on the left scroll until you find the right hand bone. Right-click on it, then select Add Socket. Name this something like mag_socket. Next, I'm going to right-click on it and add a preview asset. Then look for our magazine mesh. Move and rotate this roughly into the player's hand. However, it does not need to be that accurate, as we're going to use the world position of the magazine so that it lines up with the one in the gun. Once you've done this, save it, then go back to the player character blueprint. Here we can type the socket name into the attach actor to component. Then we want to change all of these drop-downs to keep world. Now if we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, you will see that when you press reload, our magazine actor is now spawning and being attached to the player's hand. The next event we're going to create is when the player drops this magazine onto the ground. For this we need to create a new actor blueprint, identical to our magazine blueprint, however this one we want to have physics, so that it drops from the player's hand onto the ground. So open the content browser and right click, then add a new folder. Name this Dropped Mags. Open it, then right click, then go to Blueprint Class and select Actor. Name this BP_base dropped mag. Open it, then go over to the viewport. Click Add, then add a static mesh. Name this mag. In the Details panel, set the static mesh to our magazine mesh. Then scroll down and set the collision preset to custom. Then change the object type to physics body. Then set it to ignore the pawn. Next, search for physics. Then set simulate physics to enabled. Next, we're going to create a child of this, so compile and save, then go back to the content browser. Right click on it, then select create child blueprint class. Name this BP_semi-auto rifle dropped mag. If you open it, it should already have our magazine mesh, so you can just compile and save, then we can go back to our base weapon blueprint. Here we want to add another variable that can store our dropped magazine actor, so add a variable and call it dropped mag. And set the type to our base drop mag. Make sure this is set to a class reference so that we can spawn it. Now compile and save, then go back to the semi-auto weapon. Go to class defaults, then set the dropped mag variable to our semi-auto rifle dropped mag. Now just compile and save this, then go back to the player character blueprint. Move this code across to make some space. For dropping the mag, we first want to hide the mag that is held in the player's hand, so drag in the held mag variable. Drag off it and search for a get mag. Then drag off that and search for a set visibility. Leave the new visibility set to false, then connect it to the drop pin. This should now hide the mag in the player's hand. Next, at this point we also want to spawn in the dropped mag. So for this, first drag in the current weapon variable. Drag off it and search for a get dropped mag. This is the variable containing the dropped mag actor for each weapon. Drag off it and search for a spawn actor from class. Connect this to the set visibility. For the spawn transform, we want it to spawn in the location of the magazine in the player's hand. So drag off the held mag and search for a Get Actor Transform. Connect this to the Spawn Transform pin. Now just compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. If you pick up a weapon and reload it, you will see that the player now drops the magazine on the ground. In your game, the player will likely reload quite often, so you want to despawn these dropped magazines after a certain amount of time, because having lots of them in your level could cause performance issues. So go back to your character blueprint, then drag off this return value and search for a set lifespan. This allows you to input a time that once it's finished, the actor will be destroyed. So to test it, I'm just going to set it to 5 seconds, then I'll compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. Now if you reload, once the player has dropped the magazine, after 5 seconds it will be destroyed. In your game you might want to have something a bit higher for this, so I'm just going to increase it to 10. Next we're going to make it so that the player can grab a new magazine. So first I'm just going to move this across to make some more space. All we need to do to get this to work is to make the magazine held in the player's hand visible again. So first drag in the held mag variable, then drag off it and search for a Get Mag. Drag off that and search for a Set Visibility. Set the new visibility to true, then connect it to the grab pin. Now if you compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, then pick up a gun and reload it, you will see that the magazine reappears in the player's hand. The last thing we need to do is to remove this magazine from the player's hand and attach it back to the gun. So go back to the player character. All we need to do to get this to work is to destroy the magazine actor held in the player's hand, then set the magazine in the gun to be visible again. So first drag the held mag variable into the graph, then drag off it and search for a Destroy Actor. Connect this to the load pin. Next, drag in the current weapon variable, then drag off that and search for a Get Mag. Drag off this and search for a Set Visibility. Set the new visibility to true, then connect it to the Destroy Actor. Now if we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, your full reload cycle should now be working. There is a couple more things we need to do. The first being, currently you can shoot your weapon at the same time as reloading, which we don't want to happen. So to fix this, go back to the player character and look for your shooting event. At the start, drag in your isReloading variable and get it. Drag off it and search for a branch. Connect it to the started pin, then connect the false pin to the rest of your shooting logic. Now if we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, you should no longer be able to shoot while reloading your weapon. Now I'm going to go over how you can set up different weapons to use with this reloading system. So I'm going to use a free AK-47 mesh that I've left in the video description below. So start by opening the content browser, then importing the AK-47. As you can see, all the parts of the AK are white, so we need to quickly set up the material. Open the material, then delete this node. Then go back to the content browser and open the textures folder. Hold Shift and select all of these textures, then drag them into the graph. Connect this one to the base color, then connect this one to the metallic, then this one to the ambient occlusion, then this one to the normal, and finally this one to the roughness. Click Apply, then Save. Then if you go back to the content browser, you can see that the AK is now textured. So now I'm just going to go File and then Save All. Now that you've done this, go back to the content browser and open your weapons folder. For this one I'm going to set up the full auto weapon. So open it, then go to the viewport. Here we want to select the body, then replace it with the body of the AK. Now I'm going to select the mag and replace it with the AK's mag. Next, select the body again, then go to the content browser and select the remaining parts, then drag them on to the body. Next you want to move the arrow so that it's in line with the front of the barrel of the gun. Again, use different perspectives to line this up properly. Next we want to set up the collision, so select all the parts of the gun, then scroll down in the details panel, then set the collision preset to no collision. Now we can just compile and save this, then go back to the content browser to set up our pickup for this weapon. So open the base full auto weapon pickup, then go to the viewport. Do the same again, so select the body and replace it with the AK body. Then select the body again, then go to the content browser and select all the other parts, then drag them onto the body. Then select all the parts and scroll down in the details panel, then set the collision preset to custom, leave collision enabled, then set the object type to physics body, then scroll down and set pawn to ignore. Now if you compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. If you pick up the full auto weapon, you'll see that we're now using the AK mesh. However, it's in the wrong position and it's way too big. So I'm going to go back to the base weapon blueprint and set the scale back to 1. If we try this, we can now see that the AK is the right size, however it's still not in the right place. So if I go back to the blueprint, I can just move the gun around in the scene so that it will fit better in the player's hands. This may need a bit of trial and error to get right. Next we need to create the magazines for this weapon, as if you try and reload now, we'll get all these errors, as there's no magazine set to be spawned. So go to the content browser and open your held mags folder. Right click on the base held mag and create a child of it. Name this full auto rifle held mag. Open it, then select the mag. Here we want to replace it with the AK's magazine mesh. Then we also want to scroll down and make sure the collision preset is set to no collision. Now we can compile and save, then move on to making the dropped mag. So open the dropped mag folder, then right click on the base dropped mag and create a child of it, then rename this to full auto rifle dropped mag. Again, we just want to replace this static mesh with the one from the AK. And also we want to make sure that the collisions is set up like this. Now we can just go back to the base full auto weapon and set the held mag variable to our full auto held mag and our dropped mag variable to our full auto dropped mag. Now we can just compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. Our reload system should now be working on our full auto weapon. There is one last issue that we need to fix. This is that if the player starts reloading, then picks up a weapon, the reload keeps playing on the second weapon. We don't want this to happen, we just want the reload to be cancelled. So to fix this, first go to the content browser, then open up your player character blueprint. For this to work, we want to create an event which cancels the reload animation when the player goes to pick up a weapon. In some space, right click and add a custom event. Name this Stop Reload. Next, drag in your character mesh, drag off it and search for a Get Anim instance. Drag off that and search for a montage is playing. Then go to the drop down and select our reloading animation montage. Next, drag off this and search for a branch. This will return true if our reloading animation is playing. Connect this to the custom event. Next, drag off the anim instance and search for a montage stop. This will stop our animation when this event is triggered. Go to this drop down and set it to our reloading animation montage. Next, drag in the isReloading variable, then connect it after the montage stop. We can leave this set to false as our reloading animation has been cancelled. Next, if the gun's magazine has been spawned in the player's hand, we want to destroy it, so drag in the held mag variable. We'll check if it exists by dragging off and searching for an isValid. Next, drag off it again and search for a destroy actor. Connect this to the isValid pin. Finally, go up to our spawn weapon event. Move it across to make some space, then drag off and search for our stop reloading event. Now our event is triggered every time the player picks up a new weapon. Compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. Now if you start reloading, then go to pick up a weapon, the reload animation will be cancelled. Finally, we're going to make it so that we can have different reload speeds for different weapons. So to do this, go back to the content browser and open the weapons folder. Open your base weapon blueprint. Here we want to add a new variable, which we're going to call reload speed. We want to set this to the type float. Now just compile and save this, then go back to the content browser and open one of your child weapons. Here you can go to class defaults and you can set the reload speed that you want to use. This is effectively how fast the animation is going to play. So if you set this to 2, the animation will play twice as fast, and if you set it to 0.5, the animation will play at half the speed. I'm going to set this one to 0.75. We want to quickly set this for our full auto weapon as well, so open it up, then go to class defaults and set it here. Then I'm going to set this one to 1.5. The last thing we need to do is go back to the player character blueprint, then go over to the play montage node, where we want to drag in the current weapon variable, then drag off that and search for a get reload speed. Then we can just plug that into the play rate pin, meaning our animation will play at the rate we assigned for each weapon. Now if you compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, you should now have different reload speeds for each weapon. And now you should have a working weapon reload system in Unreal Engine 5. In the next video we'll be going over how to combine this reload animation with a full ammo system. So if you want to be notified when that video comes out, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like and comment below what you would like me to cover in future videos. If you would like personal assistance with this series or your own Unreal Engine projects, check out my Patreon in the description below. Thank you so much for watching.